are there so many tourists in Valhalla? Hello, my name is Jacob, and I am a Norse Pagan, and welcome to Valhalla. Kind of, sort of, not really. This may be a Greek-style building. It's built almost identically to the Parthenon in Greece that still stands today, sort of. But this is actually dedicated to Valhalla, and the idea behind it is actually to be reconstructed as a form of the Germanic and Nordic afterlife, or at least the exciting, bloody afterlife everyone wants to talk about. It was originally an idea in 1807 that was proposed by Ludwig I of Bavaria, who really sought to unify Germany under one nation, because at this point it was still a bunch of petty kingdoms and tribes. However, it wasn't until 1830 that the first stone was laid, and this was due to the fact that Napoleon actually had occupied Germany, and it had been a form of humiliation. And so afterwards, after they managed to kick him out, this actually unified a lot of the German peoples. And so a building like this seemed more like a positive idea. And the real idea behind this was to share the voices of Germans really across history. The first person in this building that is honored is actually Arminius, which goes all the way back to the Roman times. Throughout this video, I will also be sharing with you another adventure I had the same very day on the way to Valhalla, which is a weird thing to say, on the way to Valhalla. Regardless, on the way to Valhalla, I ended up stopping off at a Celtic ring fort to kind of just see it. I mean, it's one of those things where it's like I heard about it. It wasn't even on Google Maps. There's no Wikipedia page about it. I just kind of heard about it, and I was like, well, I need to go check this out. So I did actually end up exploring this Celtic ring fort, and afterwards there was a sign nearby that said that there was Druid stones or Druidensteins that you could go to as well. So I ended up tracking down one of these Druidensteins as well. So I will also be showing you those two things throughout this video. I thought Valhalla was supposed to have 640 doors, and this one only has one. Consumerism. So the inside of this building actually features busts and plaques of many different German voices throughout history. Now, once again, this is German voices, so anyone that speaks a variation of the Germanic languages. So even Alfred the Great is honored here because he was an Anglo-Saxon. And so there are great people throughout history, all the way leading up to its completion in 1842, that are featured in here. Additionally, every 5 to 7 years, a council here in Bavaria meets to consider adding new busts and or plaques into the building to honor the modern German voices of today. So obviously voices like Albert Einstein were added later on to honor his memory as a great German person. So the Celtic ring fort. So when it comes to these things, remember that these are things I have kind of just stumbled upon from talking to people here in southern Germany / Bavaria and following these breadcrumb trails. And I don't have a book on these things. I actually don't even have a date for this ring fort. I don't have a date for these Druidensteins. So, my information is sparse. Really, I'm going to be going off of the experiences I had at these places. So as far as the ring fort goes, at first, it's not much to be seen. I mean, you probably wouldn't even notice it if you were hiking on these trails. You would just notice the elevation would change a little bit, but when you actually pay attention to it, there really is a perfect circle around this top of this hill. And then the coolest thing is at the dead center of this hill as well, there is what appears to be a burial mound, or at least some form of pit that was dug purposely. Now, this could have been dug 50 years ago, as there were trees around it. But again, it's very odd that it's in the dead center of this ring fort, which, I mean, it is quite large. I mean, this is not a small thing. And from what I can tell from, the local guides I've talked to, as well as like the small plaques I've read, this was actually even used during the 30 Years' War. Apparently the Swedes used this as a fortification, which is really quite fascinating that they used a, several hundred-year-old fortification at that time still for their own fortification. So again, that's as much information as I've been able to find. As far as the feeling there, it is quite impressive to actually be in a place that was built by the Celts of southern Germany. If you've paid attention in my Paganism on the Go series, I do have a video talking about the complicated pagan history of Germany, and the Celts are one that often gets overlooked because of the Germanic paganism, the Germanic mythology here. But for some time, the Celtic people did exist here, mostly in southern Germany, so their influence can be seen still to this day in things like this ring fort. Again, you know, as far as feelings from this, it was really just impressive. The fact that it was a near perfect circle. I mean, and even to this day, perhaps it's been maintained. I really can't tell. But I mean, to this day, it's still quite impressive to look at. And it was really hard to capture on video. That's why I got videos of me walking around so you could see me compared to the walls. I mean, really, you know, if your only weapons were, you know, spears, you know, axes, hammers, and bows and arrows, it would be quite hard to attack this fortification, just because you're going uphill. They could probably make it muddy on you, and they have a really good sight of anyone that comes by. And there's even like a kind of moat that goes around it as well, which is really cool. So who knows what they would have done with that, but it definitely seems like the moat part was purposeful as well. But overall, a really cool thing. And without it, I wouldn't have followed the breadcrumb trail all the way to the Druidensteins, which are really the coolest part of this, this trip, besides Valhalla, of course. Valhalla was pretty cool. How do you go to Valhalla? You climb the stairs. Whew. Valhalla itself sits on the Danube River, which is the second largest river in Germany. It also features a facade at the very front here that represents the goddess Germania, or at least the state of Germany, because like I said, this was built in a time that Germany was still very fractured, and so this was really a hope to unify the German states. So the figures on the far left and the far right of the facade on the front actually represent the other rivers of Germany in the Mosel and the Rhine rivers. The figures marching to the center of Germania all represent the various German states that existed after Napoleon's invasion in the early 19th century. The rear facade of the building is one of my favorite features because it features Arminius in the dead center leading the Germanic peoples in victory against the Romans. If you've seen the Netflix show Barbarians, this is actually one of the central characters is Arminius that comes back to the German tribe to help rebel against the Roman Empire because he was a German that was taken by the Romans and trained in their ways, so he actually knew their tactics in battle, and so he really was one of the turning points of the conflict with the Romans and really made the stand for who the German people were. And so I think it's really powerful that a pagan, you know, in Arminius, and someone that is so old in history and so, you know, someone that deserves a little bit more fame was featured very prominently in this building that usually up here is reserved for gods and heroes. And I think that the hero role definitely fits with a character like Arminius. So as far as these Druidensteins, again, these are something that like I was actually able to find on the map. So we just like Google mapped our way over there, and it was easy to find for the most part, but it's not, you know, this big giant monument. It really is just a set of stones that were supposedly used by the Celtic Druids in around the Bronze Age, from what I can tell, of southern Germany. It's really cool that, you know, this is just something that the Germans have access to, specifically the Bavarians. And I looked it up on a map, like just Druidensteins in Germany, and sure enough, there are quite a few scattered throughout southern Germany and even into Switzerland. You know, again, that was where the area of the Celts, for the most part, where they were. I don't know much about Celtic paganism. It's something that I've been looking more into. You know, Norse paganism still for me is kind of what I feel connected with, even though clearly I have plenty of Celtic, you know, heritage as far as the Irish side. But again, it's just really interesting that most people, including myself, you know, see the Celtic as, you know, Anglo-Saxon, as England, as Scotland, as Ireland, but not as southern Germany. So really cool. But as far as the Druidensteins, the Druid stones, you know, again, from what I heard from, you know, my local guide that was showing me around, the legend has it, the folk legend, again, take this with a grain of salt, it's the folk legend, is that this Druid stone, was used for their animal sacrifices and maybe even their human sacrifices. And the reason for this, it's something that hopefully you can tell from the video as well, is there is a bowl carved out of the rock, or at least that's what is said to have happened. They carved it out of the rock. Now, again, this could have been carved later, after the Celtic age, or it could just be a natural formation, but considering there was lots of rocks everywhere, that none of them had the same like deformation in the form of a bowl, and also there was like the area right next to it that almost looks like it's perfect to lay like a small goat. I even created an image so you can actually see what it may have looked like in the Celtic times when this spot was used. Take a look. I mean, pretty serious stuff there. I mean, it really felt very, okay. I really can't take this seriously anymore. I really love taking those pictures. But I mean, honestly, it was kind of weird. Like if I was in the mind of a goat, in that spot, I was like, wow, I really feel like I'm about to get sacrificed here, because I mean, it kind of lined up perfectly, like your head's like right where the bowl is, and then there's that like little crease where it's like that could totally be where the blood ran off. Like this definitely feels like a, you know, blood offering spot. And it definitely had some weird vibes, you know, especially laying there. It's like, if this was used for this, I wonder if people were sacrificed here and how many. And I'm laying right here. So it was definitely a really interesting spot. Again, another thing that if you were just hiking, you probably look right past. I mean, sure enough, some hikers that were clearly from here walked by, and they just like took a picture and walked by, and I really doubt they actually knew what the spot was, even though there is actually a sign like 20 feet away that literally says it's a Druid stone. So again, pretty cool stuff, but back to Valhalla. Mindet om en stor manddom synker aldrig i muldet. Sidste skål nu Hirtmanden skænket. As I said in the beginning of this video, this is very clearly not what Valhalla would probably look like. It might be. I mean, it's kind of up to the interpretation, I guess, how you view Valhalla. But, you know, I do think it kind of stirs the imagination. And I do think it's really important how popular this is. I mean, there are people everywhere here. Now, I'm sure they're just enjoying the beautiful view of the valley and the Danube River. However, I do think that, you know, people just coming to a place called Valhalla that is a giant, massive hall is still pretty darn cool. So one of the things I did want to mention at the end of this video, and while standing in a place of Valhalla, is, you know, the modern interpretation of Valhalla. This is something that I've touched on in the past. I do have 2 other videos talking about the Norse afterlife, and really this is just going to be a kind of a combination of those things. But I have the Norse afterlife, which is the pure research, the hard facts, what does it say in the prose and poetic Edda about the afterlife and the afterlives in general. And then I have another video, which is, you know, more of a fun one, but also it kind of talks about what is Valhalla to modern pagans today. And so really I want to take this time at the end of the video really to kind of rehash the points in that video as well, because I do think it's important to say this fairly often, because there are new people coming to Norse paganism every day. So this is your friendly reminder that the majority of us will not go to Valhalla. I mean, there is really nothing historically to say otherwise that, you know, people that just live a good life, that people who were inventors or scholars necessarily went to Valhalla. Historically, we really only know that warriors went. And we can also infer that since Snorri was really obsessed with, you know, Christianizing everything, and a lot of the people who recorded about these histories really were looking for those Christian equivalents, that Valhalla, you know, is kind of over-romanticized. I mean, how could it not be? I mean, the Vikings as a people, you know, were over-romanticized as well, and this is something we still see today. But there is a lot of evidence to suggest that there are multiple afterlives within the Norse religion, the Norse faith, and that it may have changed throughout history. And I think there's also significant evidence to say that, you know, reincarnation was something that the, you know, pre-Christian Scandinavian and Germanic people actually thought was a thing. And also, like we discussed in this video, the Celtic ideas. I mean, here in Bavaria, you have Celtic influences, Roman influences, Christian influences, and the Germanic influences all coming together to shape their ideas. And this is really just a, you know, small look of all the different influences that we have as modern pagans into how we view this faith today. And again, we're talking about thousands of years of changing history through various tribes. There probably was no one unified answer for a lot of things. And so when you look into the Norse afterlife, I think the best thing I can say as a practitioner of, I think, well over 5 years now, is I hardly ever think about the afterlife. This faith is really about living today, respecting nature, honoring the gods, honoring your ancestors. And ancestor veneration is an important thing for anyone, you know, anyone in this world. I mean, you know, people from all around the world, all the pre-Christian, all the pre-massive religions, you know, they had ancestor veneration. So this is really part of the afterlife, you know, is honoring those who came before. And, you know, obviously when we die, you know, just like it says in the Havamal, you know, cattle die, men die, you yourself will also die. But there's one thing that never dies, and that is one who's won a good reputation. And that's something that has always stuck with me when thinking about the afterlife. But Valhalla is still a pretty cool idea. Thank you so much for joining me for this video. Again, I know it's a weird, you know, combination of things, and I know I probably won't put the Celtic thing in the title, so I hope you enjoyed those sections as well as actually seeing Valhalla. Obviously, once again, it's not a thing that is, you know, a pagan temple by any means, but again, pretty cool that something called Valhalla to that size does exist. So I hope you enjoyed the history in this video. I hope you enjoyed taking this tour of these amazing places with me as I explore southern Germany myself. But otherwise, thank you once again for watching this video, and until Valhalla, Skål. Hello once again. Thank you so much for joining me for this adventure to Valhalla here in Germany. I hope you enjoyed it. And if you would like to support the Wisdom of Odin and what I'm doing here, please think about donating to Patreon. It's the only way I'm able to do this full time, and I try to make sure I give a lot of rewards in there as well, like our community Discord, early access videos, and I've been sharing kind of like a blog kind of thing through my adventures here in Germany, and you also get to hear some behind the scenes stuff. So if you want to support this channel and what I'm doing, please think about going down below. Otherwise, thank you so much for watching these videos, and until the hall, Skull.